styles, skills, qualities, principles, the success stories that we have heard all our lives, heard, experienced, seen in different spheres of our journey of life. So this discussion is contextualized to the corporate world that I was a part of, my own limited experience of leading teams, what worked, didn't work, some of the external leadership influences in my life, a lot of which I must confess I was unable to execute, and finally, oodles of wisdom in hindsight. So where does leadership come into play? In my mind, there are three preconditions necessary to perform as a leader. Number one, there needs to be a target or a goal to be achieved. Number two, the execution necessarily requires a team of people. And number three, it requires the right environment for the right and fair execution of the target or the goal. So in essence, this talk is an attempt to briefly touch upon these three preconditions that I have mentioned. On the first condition of a target or a goal, my boss, Daniel Schwartz at Tim Hortons, a Canadian coffee shop that I used to run in the Middle East, used to constantly say, Santosh, dream big, because dreaming big or small takes the same amount of energy. So you might as well dream big. This is something that that left a mark on me and seemed to make so much of sense. Because as a leader, your job is to inspire the team and set targets that are stretched. Not easy targets, but not adventurous either. Targets need to be made aspirational, and achieving them needs to necessarily move the needle significantly to positively impact business. Incremental impact does not inspire teams nor the board. A stretch target is one where you have a plan in place to achieve 80% of it, but has a 20% gap which needs to be bridged along that journey. So goal setting is constantly about setting the bar higher. It's about opening gaps and then going ahead and closing them. A leader plays an important role in goal setting. A business is an organization of people with varying responsibilities and bandwidth. Take the example of the retail industry where I spent a significant part of my career. The store management team, the real estate acquisition team, the warehouse team, the projects team which build the stores are the fulcrum around which the business operates. Now these are the guys fronting the business and keep the cash tills ringing. They're very, very smart people, but they're extremely busy keeping the wheels of business turning and focused on defined activities, customer serving or customer facing or otherwise. They don't have time for anything else. As the leader and the leadership team, it was our responsibility to translate the complexity of the world into simple things. It was our job to study industry trends, scan the market landscape, probe product innovation, efficient supply chains, dovetailing technology into business processes, and translating all of that into a finite number of actionable points, which can then be executed to perfection by a vast majority of the rest of the organization. Finally, achieving goals need to provide tangible pleasure when you get there. It is all about growth, it's all about bonuses, it's about exposure, it's about recognition. Here's a very important thing to differentiate between performers and non-performance. Performance necessarily needs to be suitably rewarded and slack not. The second precondition for leadership is the team. Much has been spoken and written about the management sciences, about talented, high-caliber people being the true competitive advantage in business. This is certainly true, and as a leader, it's certainly a great position to be in if you have the choice to hire the best that's an offer. However, more often than not, this is not the case. For example, I spent a significant part of my life leading startups and very young organizations where resources were very scarce to hire the best. And here when I say best, I'm talking about more from a pedigree of education rather than anything else. So I chose a different path of hiring. Traits that I looked for were a combination of energy, street smartness, entrepreneurial spirit, a twinkle in the eye. By the way, this is in no way compromising on more basic hygiene factors like skills, experience, or even intelligence. But considering everything else being equal, these factors often tip the scales on a go-no-go decision on hire. This is a very, very painstaking time and a time-consuming time for a leader of a young organization, because it is extremely important for you to be part of that hiring process, or at least till that time that traits that you have defined are well understood by HR and your leadership team. Personally speaking, I made it a point to interview almost every single store manager that we hired across all the organizations that I worked for. Extremely difficult, extremely tiring, but this was something that needed to be done to set the tone. Coming to the third precondition, and I'm going to spend some time on this for the environment. Humans are social animals, and we respond to the environment that we live in. Take good people and put them in a bad environment, and we will do bad things, and most often vice versa. So coming to this third condition of leadership, leaders are responsible for creating their environment. It is a fallacy that leaders think they are responsible for results. It's not true. Leaders are often responsible for people who are responsible for results. Results are an end product, and the environment is a means of reaching that end. So what is this environment? So environment, in my opinion, are a set of invisibles, things that are not very tangible, things that are behind the organization, what's hard to touch, what a customer doesn't see, what takes time to build, namely the habits, the behavior, the work ethos, in other words, the culture that forms the core DNA of the organization. In this context, I can't but emphasize the significance of the first 90 days as a new leader. This is a very critical phase as you set yourself up with the team and also with your bosses, be it the board or a reporting manager, whichever it may be. This is a period when every move and every action of yours is silently assessed, it's sliced, diced by peers, superiors, and subordinates alike. I've personally always liked this window of opportunity, since it always allowed me to showcase who I am, my likes, my dislikes, my work ethic, my idiosyncrasies, if there are few. This is also a period which allows you to set by example, exhibit authenticity, and gain the trust of the team. This is very important for a leader, and you need to constantly find ways of finding opportunities for this. You have to use this period to show that you're going to go that extra mile to support and take a stand on behalf of your team. This is also the time for the board or the reporting manager to get a sense of the direction and path that you're taking to drive the business forward. It's an amazing time slot, and you'll be pleasantly surprised by what you can get away with. I remember my first budget presentation during my years at Costa. During those several late nights before the budget day, with my team trying to create the famous bottom-up budget, some of them who had already spent a few years in the organization were a tad apprehensive of this mammoth exercise that I was getting them to do. Legacy apparently was that the budget was worked based on a number or a profit number that was thrust upon them by the group CEO, and the budget was worked backwards from there on. I promised them that this was not going to happen this time around. So instead of presenting a budget for the coming year, we very craftily created a stretch plan for the next 3 years, clearly marking a path to profitability. The presentation didn't go too well with the boss man, but it certainly brought me a lot of admiration from my core leadership team who were present at that meeting, and some patience from my board. Incidentally, events like this spread like wildfire within the rank and file of the organization and gives you that great head start, to say the least. In setting the culture of the organization, it is the responsibility of the leader to clearly articulate by example the core behaviors that underpin the environment that you're creating. It is also critical that these behaviors are constantly rewarded as you move on in that journey. Different organizations encourage different sets of behaviors, which then go on to form its culture. And it's not my prerogative to be critical of any of them, even though I may not agree with a lot of them, to each his own. However, one behavior that most effective leaders tend to exhibit in good measure is courage. Now, courage does not mean being authoritarian, impertinent, being argumentative, or even being fearless. Courage is to do the right thing and to stand up to the pressures which are pushing you for short-term gain. Very easily said, very difficult to execute. Courage once again comes with a precondition, the support that you get from your superiors. And this is another tough one for a CEO or a supreme leader, because boards are often a mixed bag of opinions and ideologies. However, when it comes to the organization, it's critical that the CEO displays and encourages this behavior within the leadership team, thus inspiring the rest of the organization to follow suit. Two other behaviors that I strongly believe in came from two large-hearted corporate leaders who have had a lasting influence in my working life. The first, and not necessarily in any order, is the gentleman by the name of David Novak, the ex-CEO of Yum Brands, the owners of fast food chains KFC, Pizza Hut, and Taco Bell, and whom I've had the pleasure of meeting and engaging several times. Now, here's a guy who made recognition, the art of recognition, a real art form. He didn't believe in forums like team meetings or annual gala nights to recognize behaviors that were core to Yum as an organization. He would just go out onto the stores, catch people doing the right things. His store visits during his trips to India were legendary. He would choose to do all his store visits during the peak business hours, which I can tell you was a nightmare for the managers below him. But he would spend time in the stores, meeting and talking to customers, to people, to employees. He also had this wacky habit, this was during those older days when we still had 500 and 1,000 rupee notes. He would carry a wad of these notes and spontaneously hand out money to employees whenever he saw a behavior worth the recognition. But as we made our way out of the store and into our cars, he would often say, I want you guys to do the same thing, but be careful because people are watching the behaviors that you reward. So don't just try and reward for the sake of rewarding. David always told us that it's important for a leader to take care of the team and repeatedly tell them what they do really matters. He called this being hardwired. David's office in Louisville, Kentucky was something else. I haven't personally visited it, but I've seen a number of photographs which were shared. And no exaggeration here, but every inch of wall space on David's office walls, including the ceiling, mind you, was covered with pictures taken during his numerous store visits in markets across the world. A natural leader and quite a Pied Piper with a big following. Another leader whom I read widely and I've tried to emulate, albeit with limited success, was Jack Welch of GE. Jack maintained that leaders grow from the reflected glory of their people. He says leaders need to enjoy the success around them, need to love to see them promoted, to give raises and bonuses. A concept that he coined as the generosity gene. For some this comes naturally, but for others you probably need to develop it over time. But I must confess that I have been fortunate on this count and required very minimal help. Another of Jack's mantras was candor at the workplace. Candor is the ability to tell people where they stand in terms of performance or behavior. Lack of candor often brings slack and demotivates performers, thus affecting the growth in business performance. I have loved this behavior, but never really got to execute this during my tenure as a leader. Not sure if it was a personal challenge or the environment or the times or the famous Indianness in us or a combination of all of these. But I've also discussed this with a number of my Indian contemporaries and the response has been very subliminal, and the levels of success on this front have been very minimal. Maybe we can go on this topic during our debate time today. Another of Jack's beliefs was that as head of HR, he was more important than the CEO of the business. I wish Anita was here to comment on this. However, without casting any aspersions on the HR leaders that I've come across during my working life, there have been nothing but disappointments, to say the least. Instead of being the nurturer of culture, they have often been relegated to the task of being the hangman or the executioner, which most often they seem to gleefully accept with pride. A caveat again, not Anita, of course. There are several other behaviors that influence the culture of the organization. Some interesting ones that I support are ownership, trust, vulnerability, frugality, but I'm not going into each of this due to the paucity of time. However, none of these invisibles have hard matrices for measurement, at least in the short or medium term. But I guarantee you, they will show up in the long term and positively impact all the traditional business metrics like revenue, profitability, market shares, brand loyalty, customer service, what have you. So now, how does a leader ensure that the defined behaviors percolate down to the rank and file of the organization? A research done by Robert Dunbar, a British anthropologist who studies the relationship between brain sizes and relationships, suggests that the cognitive limit to the number of stable relationships that a human can maintain is at best around 150. This is often called the Dunbar number. So as an organization scales, influences of leaders will tend to break down. It is therefore very important for the CEO or the supreme leader to create circles of trust. The CEO with his first level of leadership, the first level with the second level with the third, and so on, so that the culture permeates seamlessly through the organization. The primary role of the HR should be to monitor and ensure that the dissemination of culture and having checks and balances to ensure that this is being executed in the right spirit. So in conclusion, everybody has the capacity to become a leader, but it's not necessary that everyone chooses to be one. While leadership is a great serotonin shot, it also comes with a massive responsibility where your actions and decisions affect the lives of hundreds and maybe thousands of people who believe in you and follow you with revered obedience. That's basically my presentation. Thank you, guys.